My dear friends, imagine standing in the heart of ancient Jerusalem where the stones beneath your feet whisper tales of eternity. 2,000 years ago, an event unfolded here that forever changed the course of history, an event so profound, so debated, that it continues to stir hearts and minds across the globe: the resurrection of Jesus Christ. From this sacred city, Jesus, risen from the dead, appeared 7 times to his followers before ascending to heaven from the Mount of Olives. These 7 encounters, recorded with striking detail, are not mere stories. They are anchors of faith, testimonies of truth that invite us to ponder deeply. Why do scholars, even those who question, find these accounts compelling? Let us walk together through each appearance, step by step, to uncover the light of hope they reveal. As dawn barely kissed the horizon, a woman named Mary Magdalene ventured alone toward a tomb. This was no ordinary woman. Once tormented by darkness, she had been freed by the love of Jesus. Behind her trailed other women, their arms laden with spices to anoint his body, their hearts heavy with grief. They passed the place of his crucifixion, where only days before Mary had witnessed unimaginable sorrow. She saw him mocked, beaten, and nailed to a cross as the crowd roared, "Crucify him." She stood there as Roman soldiers cast lots for his garments as he breathed his final breath. Now, arriving at the tomb, she found it empty. Only 2 mysterious figures sat within. Tears streamed down her face, for not only was her savior dead, but his body seemed stolen. "Why do you weep?" the figures asked. Through her sobs, she spoke of her loss. Then, turning, she saw a man standing before her. "Why are you crying?" he asked gently. Her eyes, blurred by tears, could not recognize him until he spoke her name, Mary. In that moment, her heart leapt. Jesus was alive. Overcome with joy, she ran to tell the disciples, as did the other women who also saw him. Yet, the disciples, bound by the skepticism of their time, dismissed their words. A woman's testimony held no weight in the courts of men. Why then would this story begin with Mary Magdalene, a woman once possessed, if it were mere invention? This detail, so unlikely for a fabricated tale, whispers of truth. The news of the empty tomb spread like wildfire through Jerusalem. 2 disciples, not of the 12, walked the 7-mile road to Emmaus, their hearts burdened with questions. They spoke of the women's report of the tomb unguarded and open. This was no hidden place. Anyone could visit and see for themselves. Days earlier, Roman guards had stood watch, their lives at stake should they fail. Yet, when an angel rolled away the stone, they fled, not to their commander, but to the Jewish leaders who bribed them to spread a lie that the disciples stole the body. A lie that echoes even today. As these 2 travelers pondered, a stranger joined them, asking about their conversation. They shared their confusion, unaware that this stranger was Jesus himself. Only when they reached Emmaus, as he broke bread in their home, did their eyes open. In an instant, he vanished, leaving them in awe. They raced back to Jerusalem, hearts ablaze, to tell the disciples. If this were a fabricated story, why choose these obscure travelers for such a pivotal moment? Why not craft a tale that elevates the storyteller? This humbleness points to a deeper truth. That same night, as the disciples gathered behind locked doors, fear gripping their hearts, Jesus appeared among them. The travelers from Emmaus had just shared their story, but doubt still clouded the room. Was this a ghost? Jesus, knowing their fear, spoke firmly. "Why are you troubled? Look at my hands and feet. Touch me and see." He ate fish before them, proving his reality. Yet, even then, some hesitated, their hearts slow to believe. This was his 3rd appearance, and it reveals a striking honesty. The disciples, the very ones who would carry his message, are shown as doubtful, even stubborn. If they were crafting a myth, would they paint themselves in such an unflattering light? This raw vulnerability, this admission of weakness, invites us to trust their testimony. For who would invent a story that humbles themselves so? My dear friends, as we stand in the shadow of these 7 appearances, let us pause to reflect on the world in which they unfolded. Jerusalem, 2,000 years ago, was a city alive with tension, a crossroads of faith and power. The Jewish people, under Roman rule, clung to their sacred traditions while yearning for liberation. The temple stood as the heart of their worship, yet its courts echoed with debates among Pharisees, Sadducees, and Zealots. Into this world, Jesus came not as a conqueror with armies, but as a teacher of love, a healer of souls. His death on the cross was meant to silence him, to crush the hope he kindled. Yet his resurrection shattered the chains of death, proclaiming a truth that no empire could contain. Consider the audacity of this claim: a man crucified, buried, and guarded rises again. In the eyes of the Romans, crucifixion was the ultimate humiliation reserved for rebels and slaves. For the Jewish leaders, a crucified Messiah was a scandal, a contradiction of their expectations. Yet, the empty tomb stood as a silent witness, defying every attempt to suppress it. The guards, tasked with ensuring no miracle could be faked, fled in fear. The Jewish leaders, rather than investigating the truth, paid to spread a rumor. Why such desperation? Because the resurrection was not a private event, it was public, undeniable, and transformative. The tomb, hewn from rock in a garden, was no secret vault. It lay open for all to see, inviting scrutiny. The women, the travelers, the disciples, and the 500 did not whisper their testimony in hidden corners. They proclaimed it boldly, even at the cost of their lives. This truth reshaped the world. The resurrection was not merely a miracle, it was a declaration that love is stronger than death, that forgiveness triumphs over sin. In a culture where women's voices were dismissed, Jesus chose Mary Magdalene to be his first witness. In a society that valued power, he appeared to obscure travelers and doubting disciples. In a world of fear, he brought peace. These choices were not accidents, they were signs of a kingdom where the lowly are lifted, where the broken are made whole. The disciples, once cowering behind locked doors, became fearless heralds of this gospel. Peter, who denied Jesus, faced crucifixion himself, refusing to recant. John, boiled in oil, endured exile yet never wavered. 500 witnesses carried this message across continents, planting seeds that grew into a faith embraced by millions. Even those who doubt the resurrection cannot deny its impact. Secular historians, from Tacitus to Josephus, record the rapid spread of Christianity, a movement born from the belief that Jesus rose. Scholars like Gerd Ludemann, though skeptical of a physical resurrection, affirm that the disciples' encounters were real to them, so real that they staked their lives on it. Why? Because they saw, they touched, they knew. Hallucinations cannot explain this. A medical expert calculates the odds of a shared audiovisual hallucination among even 7 people as near impossible, yet here we speak of hundreds united in their vision of the risen Christ. Their courage, their unity, their joy in suffering all point to a truth that transcends explanation. This truth speaks to us today. The resurrection is not a relic of history but a living promise. It tells us that no darkness is too deep, no sin too great for God's love to redeem. It invites us to lay down our fears, our doubts, our burdens, and to trust in the one who conquered death. Perhaps as you hear these words, you feel a gentle tug at your heart. Do not be afraid. Jesus, who met Mary in her tears, Thomas in his doubt, and Peter in his shame, is calling you. He does not ask for perfection, he asks for your trust. His wounds, still visible in his risen body, are the proof of his love for you. I invite you, dear friends, to taste and see the goodness of this truth. Reflect on these 7 appearances, on the women who first saw him, the travelers who walked with him, the disciples who touched him, and the multitude who witnessed him. Their stories, raw and real, beckon us to trust. If this message has touched you, share it with someone you love. Leave a comment below, tell us what stirs your heart. Subscribe and join us as we explore more stories of faith, including an upcoming journey into the life of a figure whose influence echoes through history. Like this video, share it widely, and let us together spread the light of hope. May the Spirit of God guide you, now and always. The resurrection of Jesus was not the end of the story, but the dawn of a new beginning. As the echoes of his appearances faded from the hills of Galilee and the streets of Jerusalem, the disciples stood at a crossroads. They were ordinary men, fishermen, tax collectors, dreamers, yet they had seen the impossible. They had touched the hands of the risen Christ, eaten with him, and heard his voice. Now they faced a world that would mock them, persecute them, and demand their silence. What would they do with this truth? Let us journey with them to see how the fire of the resurrection kindled a movement that no force could extinguish. After Jesus ascended from the Mount of Olives, the disciples returned to Jerusalem, their hearts no longer gripped by fear but ablaze with purpose. They gathered in an upper room, not to hide, but to pray and wait for the promise Jesus had given, the coming of the Holy Spirit. On the day of Pentecost, as the city swelled with pilgrims from every corner of the known world, the Spirit descended like tongues of fire. Peter, once the denier, stood before thousands and proclaimed with unshakable conviction, "This Jesus, whom you crucified, God has raised from the dead, and we are all witnesses." The crowd, pierced to the heart, responded in droves. 3,000 souls embraced the message that day. This was no mere sermon, it was the birth of a community bound by the truth of the resurrection, a community that shared all they had, broke bread together, and lived with a joy that baffled their neighbors. But this joy came at a cost. The same leaders who had condemned Jesus now turned their wrath on his followers. Peter and John were arrested, beaten, and ordered to stop preaching. Yet they replied, "We cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard." Stephen, a man full of grace and power, became the first to die for this truth, stoned as he gazed into heaven and saw Jesus standing at God's right hand. His death, far from silencing the message, scattered the believers like seeds across Judea and Samaria, where they carried the gospel with them. Saul, a fierce persecutor, encountered the risen Jesus on the road to Damascus, transformed from an enemy into Paul, the apostle who would take this message to the ends of the earth. Each step, each sacrifice was rooted in the unshakable reality of what they had witnessed. Consider the lives they led. These were not men chasing fame or power. They faced chains, exile, and death. James, the son of Zebedee, was beheaded by Herod. Philip was crucified, Andrew scourged and bound to a cross for days. Tradition holds that Bartholomew was flayed alive, yet he preached until his final breath. These were not the actions of men peddling a lie. Throughout history, many have died for beliefs they thought true, but the disciples died for what they knew, because they had seen Jesus alive, spoken with him, and felt his wounds. Their blood became the seed of the church, and their testimony a beacon that still shines. This movement was not confined to the disciples alone. The 500 who saw Jesus on the hill in Galilee carried his message to their families, their villages, and beyond. Women like Mary Magdalene and Joanna became vital witnesses, their voices rising in a world that sought to silence them. The early Christians, many of them poor and powerless, lived with such radical love that they confounded the Roman Empire. They cared for the sick during plagues, fed the hungry, and welcomed the outcast. Even their enemies marveled, saying, "See how these Christians love one another." The resurrection was not a story they told, it was a reality they lived, a power that transformed their hearts and their world. What does this mean for us 2,000 years later? The resurrection is not a distant event, locked in the pages of history. It is a living invitation, a call to each of us to encounter the risen Christ. The disciples' courage, their joy in suffering, their love for one another, all flow from the truth that Jesus is alive. He is not a memory, but a presence walking with us in our doubts, our fears, our brokenness. My friends, you may feel unworthy, as if your mistakes have placed you beyond his reach. But hear this, Jesus chose a woman once possessed, a denier like Peter, a skeptic like Thomas, and a persecutor like Paul. He chooses you too. His resurrection means that no darkness can hold you, no chain can bind you, for he has overcome them all. I invite you to pause and listen to the whisper of your heart. Perhaps as you hear these stories of Mary's tears, Peter's redemption, the 500's witness, you feel a longing for something more. That longing is the voice of God calling you to trust, to love, to live in the light of the resurrection. Do not be afraid to take that step. Speak to Jesus as you would a friend. Lay before him your doubts, your hopes, your fears. He is listening, and his love for you is boundless. My dear friends, this story is not mine alone to tell, it is ours to share. If these words have stirred your soul, pass them on to someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below and share what this story means to you. Has the resurrection touched your life? Who in history besides Jesus has inspired you most? Let us know, for your voice matters. Subscribe to join us on this journey as we prepare a new video exploring the life of a figure whose legacy shaped the world. Can you guess who it might be? Like this video, share it far and wide, and let us together be witnesses to the light that never fades. May the risen Christ fill your heart with peace, guide your steps, and draw you ever closer to his love, now and forever.